Week 9 of the fantasy football season, and here's a few plays I look to sell and trade this week. The first guy, Gus Edwards of the Baltimore Ravens. So Gus Edwards, a career game, no doubt about it, Week 8 at the Cardinals, and I don't think it's going to happen again. So right now, coming off a 19-carry, 80-yard game with 3 rushing touchdowns and 2 catches, 14 yards. He's a perfect sell-high candidate. The last 2 weeks, Edwards, he's definitely gone out there and played great football, but Lamar Jackson, majority of the time, is going to get those goal line looks, but for whatever reason, they went with Edwards in this one, tried to keep hits off of Lamar in this game in Week 8, and it definitely worked out. So Week 9 is a tougher opponent, obviously, versus Seattle Seahawks. They're pretty stout versus the run for the most part, where we didn't really see many guys break loose for the Browns in that backfield. So right here, Gus Edwards playing great football the last 2 weeks, but like I said, I don't see it keeping up before coming into Week 7. He only had 1 double-digit fantasy game, and like I said, Lamar Jackson's going to run more times than not. So Edwards with 4 touchdowns the last 2 games, he's definitely a play I look to sell and trade this week. The next play is Dak Prescott of the Dallas Cowboys. So Dak Prescott, the last 2 games, he's gone out there and put up big numbers, no doubt about it, for this Cowboy team and fantasy owners. Week 6 at the Chargers, 272 pass yards, a touchdown, 40 rushing, and a rushing touchdown. And then Week 8, monster game, one of the best games of his career versus the Rams. 304 pass yards, 4 touchdowns, an INT, and 19 rushing yards. So Week 9 on paper, it's not a bad matchup at the Eagles that give up the 9th most fantasy points to QBs on the season. But right now, his track record versus the Eagles the last couple seasons haven't been good for Dak Prescott. This Eagle team, for the most part, they've taken care of business the last 2 years with this Dallas Cowboy team. And it's a tough matchup, like I said. I know on paper it looks great here for Prescott, but versus these type of defenses, he has more trouble than not. We saw it early in the season with San Francisco. He had trouble. Even Arizona had some trouble as well with Dak Prescott. So this week here, I don't see the numbers being like they have over the last 2 weeks, where I see probably 18, 20 fantasy points as most. So right now, since he's coming off of 2 great games here as Prescott, he's definitely a player I look to sell and trade this week. Next play is DeAndre Hopkins of the Tennessee Titans. So Will Levis, no doubt about it, is a huge upgrade with his arm strength and just the way he could play the game and move in the pocket than a Ryan Tannehill. And Hopkins had the best game of the season for him easily. 4 catches, 128 yards, and 3 touchdowns. But one of them was a deep ball where he just burned the secondary. Another one, he just broke a couple tackles and found the end zone. And then another deep ball as well. So him and Levis, no doubt, were hitting on that deep ball and making big plays versus Atlanta defense that was great coming into the game, giving up the 5th least amount of fantasy points to receivers on the season. But right now, Hopkins, he's up there in age, a lot of miles on his body as well. And he's a wide receiver this season with only 4 games out of the first 7 with double-digit fantasy points in PPR leagues. So right now, like I said, after coming off a 33-point fantasy game in PPR leagues for DeAndre Hopkins, he's a sell-high candidate because we've seen a lot of lows for him. And you just never know with this Tennessee offense. Even though I think Will Levis could be the real deal, even though he did fall in the NFL draft, the arm strength, you can't teach arm strength like that. The poise in the pocket, and just a bigger quarterback as well that could take hits, a better pocket passer than some of these younger quarterbacks that have got drafted over the last year or 2. So right now, with his numbers will definitely be better, but after coming off a monster 3-touchdown performance, he's a sell high this week. The next sell high is Devonta Smith of the Philadelphia Eagles. So Smith, he's pretty much been a deep ball or nothing this year, and him and Jalen Hurts did connect on a nice deep ball in the Week 8 victory at the Washington Commanders, where he had in that one a big one. But right now we know, obviously, A.J. Brown, he's the main man in that offense. 6 games in a row now with 125 yards plus receiving, breaking an NFL record. So Brown and Hurts are on the same page, out of this world. And Devonta Smith, like I said, he really hasn't done much this season. He's had 2 pop games and the rest pretty much pedestrian type of ball games this year for Devonta Smith. So right now, coming off a good game and a tougher matchup on paper versus the Dallas Cowboys that give up the 2nd least amount of fantasy points to receivers on the season. Devonta Smith is a sell high this week. Next guy is Jordan Addison of the Minnesota Vikings. So right now, obviously, with Kirk Cousins out for the season, his value goes down in a big way here. Is Jordan Madison. And Madison, he was starting to look like he could be that number 1 wide receiver if they did decide to trade, obviously, Justin Jefferson away in the offseason here. If they decided they didn't want to re-sign him to a contract or if he just didn't want to come back. Jordan Addison, obviously one of the better receivers coming out of college football, but now with Kirk Cousins out for the season with the torn Achilles, everyone's going to take a major hit in this offense right now for this Minnesota Viking team. Aaron Hall now coming in as the starting quarterback, so we saw a little bit of Hall in that one. He had 23 pass yards in that one, a fumble loss, and he's going to be the quarterback, but they're going to bring in a veteran or something, I believe, is this Viking team. But Kirk Cousins, he's known the system very well the last few seasons over there in Minnesota. He knows how to spread the football out and get the ball to his playmakers. And right now, Addison, after a great rookie season so far in the year with 7 touchdowns, I don't see him doing much at all, if anything, unless they go out there and make a trade for a starting quarterback at the trade deadline this week here. But anyway, if the Cousins going down, and like I said, Addison and Cousins had a great rapport and great chemistry, he's definitely a wide receiver and a player I look to sell this week. The next guy is George Kittle of the San Francisco 49ers. So Kittle easily the best game of the season here for him. 9 catches, 149 yards, and he broke out in a big way. But a lot of it was catch-up ball as well. So right now, 3 games in a row, this San Francisco 49er team has lost, which is very surprising to me, obviously, going into the bye week here in Week 9. So George Kittle, the last 2 weeks, he's gone out there and put numbers up. But the first 3 out of 4 weeks, we really didn't see much out of George Kittle. So right now, with the bye week coming up and him having a monster game where you don't really see tight ends besides Travis Kelce for the most part get over 140, 145 yards, it's a perfect time here to sell George Kittle high. This was the type of game some owners were waiting for to sell him loose. Because like I said, him and Brock Purdy, for the most part, it's only been a red zone thing with these 2 players over the last season and a half since Purdy's come in as the starting quarterback. So right now, after a big game and a game we probably won't see once again this season here from George Kittle, he's definitely a sell-high candidate. And if you could get a running back or a receiver in a deal, that's obviously huge, especially the way the running back position has been this season. And the final player I look to sell in trades, Trevor Lawrence of the Jacksonville Jaguars. So Trevor Lawrence, a lot of high hopes for people this season coming into the end. Lawrence, pretty much, I've said in other videos, he tops out anywhere from 16, 20 fantasy points. And now with the Jaguars going on by, then a tough matchup versus San Francisco 49ers in Week 10. The next few weeks here, he really won't be usable as Trevor Lawrence. And like I said, the quarterback's definitely a tougher position this season besides the top 6, 7 guys. And now with another injury and Kirk Cousins out for the season with a torn Achilles, Lawrence, he might actually have some value for an owner to go out there and get. So if you could get a running back or even a 3rd or 4th wide receiver in a deal for Lawrence, I think it's not bad here for fantasy owners because Travis Etienne's the vocal point of this offense. Calvin Ridley, he really hasn't been all that great for this team. Hit or miss, boom or bust type of player. So right now with Lawrence, like I said, he's topped out this season for the most part, 16, 20 fantasy points range. He's at quarterback where his ceiling I thought would have been higher, but the first 8 weeks of the season, we haven't seen it. So that's a few plays I look to sell and trade here in Week 9 of the fantasy football season.